Well, hello and welcome as we continue our chronological read through of Scripture. When we stopped reading yesterday, 9 of Joseph's brothers had returned home. Simeon was detained by Joseph in Egypt. Jacob wasn't willing to send Benjamin to Egypt to prove the claim that the family was not spying for fear that he would lose yet more sons. So basically, everybody sat where they were, waiting. But that could not last. You see, the famine was very severe, and it covered all of the land. So eventually, Jacob was forced to give in and to send his sons back to Egypt with Benjamin for more grain, or the family would die of starvation. Jacob was careful to send them with gifts from the land, and also to send them with double the money, since the money from their first purchase had been returned to them in their bags. When they arrived in Egypt and Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he prepared a feast at his home for them. The brothers they were afraid to go to Joseph's house. They were still very worried about what all had happened. And as soon as they arrived at the house, they told the steward about the returned money. The steward told them to be at peace, that their grain had been paid for. Though they didn't know and were not really told, it's probably likely that Joseph paid for the grain himself. Joseph's brothers were treated royally at Joseph's house, and though we're not told for sure, certainly at that point in time they were reunited with Simeon as well. Joseph arranged the seating for the meal in birth order, which really amazed the brothers. And Benjamin was served a portion that was 5 times larger than any of the others. Likely Joseph was testing them to see whether or not the brothers still held on to the jealousy as they had before, particularly with him. He inquired about if their father was still alive, how he was doing. He greeted Benjamin, and then that was pretty much all he could take for a while. He had to leave the room for a while to compose himself. But when he returned, they had their meal, and they enjoyed each other. In the morning, the brothers began their journey home. They were given their sacks of grain, generous portions, and they were sent on their way. Once again, the money was returned to their sacks, and this time, Joseph's personal silver cup was placed in Benjamin's sack. Shortly after they left the city, they were stopped and accused of stealing from Joseph, something which, of course, they vehemently denied because they had no idea what had happened. Of course, the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, so they were forced to return to Joseph's house, where Joseph insisted that Benjamin would have to stay for stealing. He couldn't leave. He couldn't go back. The others were free to go home in peace. Well, Judah appealed to Joseph to keep him instead, telling the story of how important Benjamin was to his father, especially since his brother, who of course was Joseph, was presumed at this point to be dead. Knowing now that they were truly repentant for what they had done, Joseph broke down and revealed himself to his brothers, who at that point were only more terrified that Joseph would exact his revenge on them. But Joseph reassured them, telling them that what they had intended for evil, God had intended for good. Joseph then, with Pharaoh's approval, sent the brothers home to retrieve their father and to come to live with him in Egypt. As you might expect, when Jacob first heard their story, he didn't really believe it. But the gifts that Joseph had sent convinced him, and Jacob's spirits were lifted that he would once again see his son, who he thought he had lost. Yet Jacob hesitates. He hesitates leaving the promised land. He had God's promise about the land. How could he know whether or not going to Egypt is God's will? That, my friends, is where we leave our reading today. May God be with you and bless you again. I pray that your reading is edifying you and helping you to grow in your spiritual life. We'll gather again then tomorrow. May God be with you and bless you.